Story 1. I was asked how I would go about reducing the number of states by one. I said give Florida back to Spain. Apparently, the correct answer was to merge two states. Stupid question. Story 2. I got asked what I would do if I had the money to do whatever I want. I said art for kids or something. He said, do that, man, do what you love. Why are you here? I asked, you mean to tell me your dream is being the manager for a dingy little machine shop? He said yes, but he looked mad. I didn't get the job. Story 3. I don't know about unusual, but I had a potential employer ask me what the 8-month gap in my resume was about. This was in 2021. I'm a chef. This was a restaurant, resort that was interviewing me. Did you guys miss that whole thing about the world shutting down and the bottom falling out of the food service industry? I did not take that job. Story 4. What's your body count? I just laughed because I didn't understand it at first, so I said I didn't know. Then he moved on to other questions. Later, when I said it to my friends, they told me it was a sexual question. Story 5. I was asked once, at the very end of an interview, kind of as a joke, to calculate the sum total of 1 to 100. 1 plus 2 plus 3, 99 plus 100. Total complete coincidence, but I had just read a story on Wikipedia the night before about some mathematician, I think Euler, who, when asked during class as a kid, answered that correctly. He didn't actually calculate the number in his head. He just used a quick heuristic method to determine the total. 0 plus 100 is equal to 100. 1 plus 99 is equal to 100. 2 plus 98 is equal to 100, etc. So, I paused for a moment during the interview to make it look like I was thinking, and then gave the answer. I don't remember at all how they reacted, but I was proud of it, and it was one of the few times my rabbit hole Wikipedia dives have actually come in handy. Story 6. It was the strangest interview experience I had ever had. I remember one of the many interviewers asking me to tell him a joke. In hindsight, I wish I had said, "This interview," and walked out. By that point, I wasn't going to accept the job even if they offered it to me. Story 7. How have you empowered women and eliminated racism in the workplace? I was 24. I had only worked at a movie theater, Domino's, and an aluminum recycling factory. Story 8. First runner-up. Can I see your portfolio? We do not need a graphic artist, but I love looking at portfolios. Winner. Do you play EverQuest? We play as a company every Wednesday and need another dependable player. Story 9. You ever kill anyone? I was interviewing, and the interviewer noticed I had Marine Corps on my resume. The question was in the same tone as, where did you go to school? The other interviewer got flustered and gave her a significant side eye. I responded with, I did what the mission entailed. I didn't get the job, thought of lodging a complaint, and decided against it. Story 10. The first question about how I interact with difficult personalities was normal. I gave some normal answer about perceptions, differing priorities, and ways to cut through that. The next 4 questions, which got more and more specific about dealing with difficult people, were not normal. Sorry, buddy, your company needs a therapist and to just fire those 2 tyrants, not a new product line manager. At least I could figure out why the position was vacant. Story 11. What were your favorite activities and least favorite activities as a child? This was a director-level position at a hydrogen company. It's actually a really interesting question to ask, right? It also had nothing to do with the job. Story 12. Interviewing at the same school my partner taught at, as my school was not good. Everything was going well when one interviewer asked, if you and your husband got divorced, would you stay working at our school? Like what? Story 13. Not me, but my husband was asked once, if you were a kitchen gadget, what would you be? He replied, a can opener. He was interviewing for a journalism role. Story 14. I work in the telecommunications industry. At one company where I was interviewing for a job, one of the people at the table asked me how I felt about police officers. I blinked. I asked what this had to do with the job. He told me it's just a question he likes to ask. When the main boss was walking me through the lobby, he told me Deputy Fife was a former detective and didn't like to hire people who don't back the blue. Needless to say, I didn't go to work there. Story 15. Questions I hate are those questions that have no answer, and they are trying to get you to reason out an answer. How many windows? How many wheels? How many light bulbs? Is there more X than Y? If you could have any job, what would it be? Yours. Story 16. The most unique question I got was how many $1 bills it would take to cover the floor in a single layer in this room. It is akin to questions like how many tennis balls it takes to fill a 747 jet. The correct answer is to use logic to find an answer instead of saying, I don't know, 350. Story 17. What is your disability? Who is paying for your disability? Your current employer. Yes, completely unlawful questions. Did not get the job. Filed a complaint with the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. Story 18. It's a super basic, common question for most interviews and applications, but being asked, why do you want this job? Will always be strange to me. If someone is applying to a job, they likely are doing so because they need money. They want it because they have to have a job. The company is not special 99% of the time. Why are you asking? Stop it. Since a lot of people are replying to me with the same thing, I just want to add something. I agree it can be useful to ask this if it's for certain circumstances and jobs, but not every job. I have applied to and interviewed for a lot of jobs, and I feel it's highly unnecessary for places like fast food places, general chain stores, and basic retail stores to ask this question because they will probably never get a sincere answer. If it's for a corporation, a higher position than entry level, or a specialty position of any kind, that question can set people apart and let the interviewer know if someone is fit for the role. It just doesn't need to be on as many applications and in as many interviews as it is. It's unnecessary to make people answer in an insincere way when they're applying to most of those low-level jobs just because they have to. Story 19. I was given a specific task to do in AutoCAD, however, I chose, as long as it was done quickly and correctly. I did so, and then was immediately berated for not doing it how the interviewer would have. This was also an interview where, as I was being shown around the building, I overheard the two men interviewing me discussing my outfit openly, within earshot of me, in the middle of a warehouse. There were so many other red flags at that interview that I was waiting to be told I was on candid camera. Story 20. I have an Asian last name and an obvious wedding band. I am very obviously not Asian. The interviewer was noticeably surprised when we met, asked how to pronounce my last name, and then said they had been expecting someone Asian and asked how I ended up with that last name. I said, they still let women get married in this country. I did not get the job. Story 21. Not necessarily a particular question I was asked, but I had a Zoom interview where I would spend time with a group of 3 potential coworkers for about an hour as they would pepper me with questions. Then I would go to another room with 3 more potential coworkers, and they would also ask me questions. Throughout the interview, I met with about 4 groups of potential coworkers, and they all asked the same questions. To this day, I don't understand the point of it. I literally answered the same questions 4 different times with 4 different groups of people. I ended up getting offered the job and even asked them about the strange interview after I was hired, but never really got a clear answer as to why they have candidates answer the same questions all day long. Story 22. Applied to be a hostess at Applebee's in the 2010s when the manager asked, "Why did you apply here?" I'm like, "It's a great restaurant and it has a great atmosphere." "What makes it a great atmosphere?" I'm like, "Everyone is welcoming and nice." "How are they welcoming and nice?" Yeah, I didn't get that job because I couldn't give any more answers. It was such a weird interview. Story 23. I was halfway through a panel interview and doing well when one person, let's call him Tim, asks, "Okay, so we want to give you a real scenario. Our company has a number of women getting pregnant. How would you reduce pregnancy?" This was such a bizarre question the way Tim asked. I thought he was testing my ethics and risk-based mindset, so I responded, this sounds like a public relations and human resources nightmare, and I would never risk the company's reputation. I wouldn't touch this subject at all. Tim proceeded to push it. Haha. No, seriously. How would you reduce women getting pregnant? I was starting to get uncomfortable and doubled down, which he doubled down on and started getting more aggressive. His team lead, who was also on the panel, finally said, "Okay, let's just proceed with the rest of the interview, and in the future," Tim asked the whole question, How would you reduce pregnancy leave? Both Tim's and my faces changed colors, him pale, and me after saying, "Oh, well, in that case." His team lead stops me, and I remember staring daggers and saying, "Thanks, Tim." Didn't get called back. Forget Tim. Story 24. During an in-person interview with a panel of advertising agency creatives. Advertising agency. What kind of car do you drive? Me. Oh, do you have an automaker as a client? Agency. No. Me. A dealership? Agency. No. Me. A business-to-business parts supplier? Agency. No. Me. Are you hoping to go after clients in the automotive market? Agency. Well, not really. Me. Maintaining eye contact while silently realizing I don't want to work for these people. Agency. We'll be in touch. Story 25. Can you start right now? And he meant right now. He sat me down at the desk, and that was it, a secretarial job. I stayed with that organization for 33 years, and when I left, believe me, that would not have flown at all. Human resources would have dragged things out for 3 months before offering me the job. Story 26. If you were an animal, what would you be and why? I said cockroach because they thrive everywhere, eat anything, and can't be eliminated. The interviewer was horrified. I guess he thought I'd say something cliché like lion or eagle or something. Story 27. Who are you and why are you even here? I was called back for a second interview. Human Resources explicitly told me not to bring a resume. When I sat down with the vice president of the company, he asked for my resume. I explained I was asked not to bring one, and he said, "You weren't asked that by me, so who are you and why are you even here?" He was done with the interview pretty much from the start. I was 4 months into unemployment. I left crying and contemplated deliberately crashing into a tree at high speed on the way home. Story 28. Not really strange but funny. The interviewer asked my friend what he would describe as his weaknesses. He said digestive biscuits and leggy blondes. He got the job. Story 29. I was a part-time employee at one place interviewing for a similar full-time position in another. The entire interview was spent with the interviewers asking about the budget and workings of areas outside my department. So that was weird. Story 30. Interviewing for a full-stack developer role, I was asked to explain how to brew a cup of coffee to someone who had never done it. The idea was to see the way I approach tasks and explain concepts, whether in detail and methodically or with broad strokes. I stumbled a lot because I said my approach would change vastly depending on whom I'm talking to and how they would best comprehend. They appreciated that consideration. Story 31. I was once asked, what are 5 ways to use a brick? Fortunately, I had enough common sense to know not to answer with anything illegal. This was for a sales position at a Best Buy. Story 32. Just the other day, I was asked what my favorite superhero was. They asked me to name the book that changed Steve Jobs' life a few minutes prior to that. Needless to say, I got up and left without saying a word. Story 33. Here are a few good ones from my last few interviews. If you were to go on vacation, where would you go? What is your political standpoint for this election? Outside of work, what are your go-to meals? What do any of these have to do with work? Also, I get asked, what are my hobbies? Once again, what do any of them have to do with work? Note, this was before I got my current job. Story 34. Craziest interview question. If you were a kitchen appliance, what would you be and why? Very weird question, but what they are trying to get at is creative insight. Are you a blender or a toaster? What does it say about the qualities you bring? Story 35. After telling the interviewer I really did not want the job and that I was sort of coerced into the interview, she asked me if I could start tomorrow. Story 36. I was asked if I have any children. I was 5 months pregnant at the time. It's not a strange question, but her tone gave off the impression that they don't want to hire parents. Story 37. How well I perform under pressure. I had an intake with a lead developer and a Scrum Master. The Scrum Master asked me this while the developer asked me a bunch of technical questions. They didn't really have a structure and just fired off questions at random, which was really unsettling. At this time, I was a junior, new to the technology, and although I had some experience as a developer, it would be my first time using this technology. I asked them what they expected of this role, and the developer said that it was mostly about learning as much as possible and that I would be growing into my function. So why would they ask me how I perform under pressure? I answered that I don't really experience pressure all that much, which might sound silly. I get that. They later rejected me because of my lack of knowledge of the technology. I just had a horrible time in that interview and honestly don't get their approach. I work in consultancy, and a few months later I joined the same company but in a different team. So I kept having to see them, which was weird. I've only had a lot of positive feedback working there. When I expressed my desire to leave, they did their best to keep me on. Which makes me wonder, why was I rejected the first time? Why was that interview so jarring? Story 38. We were at a small company. We asked a lot of questions to understand the personality and person. The team of 6, as casual as it could be, would ask a mix of questions. We mixed up who asked, but always included a humorous or speedy one. What's your favorite Pokemon and why? Or Chick-fil-A or Bojangles? All those hired had great answers.